This is so reprehensible. It is reprehensible in all of the ways that Fox is. But if you watch, it's with Jesse Waters. He's also, a horrible, and he's like Tucker Carlson's the prototype, and Jesse Waters is sort of the poor man's Tucker Carlson. But what's important to watch here is also Tucker's face when Waters says this stuff, because you can see that Tucker almost laughs, and he doesn't want to break the idea that, like, I mean, he knows the thing about Tucker Carlson is that's really, really disgusting. And Waters is very similar in this way. He doesn't care about anything. This guy cares only about putting on a show that he thinks is going to drive a viewership, period. End of story. That's it. And you can see him almost laugh at what Waters says, but then he tries to, hold it in, not because they're doing a comedy bit. I mean, I've been in that situation, but because he gets a kick out of this and knows that his audience is going to lap it up. And he doesn't, he is the same way that he would go out and promote the Iraq war and didn't care at all about it, and didn't care. And
it's a game, this like mass manipulation of swaths of vulnerable people. I don't know what's worse if you actually genuinely believe this. I think no, what he does is worse.
That is like an age-old debate, right? But
right.
Here it is. And then, of course, what Waters is saying in and of itself is also reprehensible.
God, he's like such a...
The people who run the country are telling us two things. One, the country's not worth having. It's terrible. And two, despite being the most powerful people in the country, they're oppressed. How should we interpret this?
Well, first, we did not steal this land.
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second.
The most powerful people in the country acting like they're oppressed. It's almost like that's projection, Tucker.
He's talking about Cori Bush.
Yeah.
And specifically, right? Because she's speaking out. Now, of course, she's not speaking out for just herself. She's speaking out on behalf of her constituents. And in many respects, also, referring to the experience of Black people, people of color in this country. And that's the point. That again, in Tucker's world, there is a massive anti-white bias against white people in this country. Go.
Like being the most powerful people in the country, they're oppressed. How should we interpret this?
Well, first, we did not steal this land. We won this land on the battlefield, and the rest we purchased from the Europeans. So I don't know what Congresswoman Bush wants us to do. Are we supposed to give the Dakotas back to Crazy Horse's family? Are we supposed to give California back to Mexico? As tempting as that sounds, Tucker, it's not a good idea. Then she says blacks aren't free in this country. Blacks are free except from the Democrat Party. And many blacks have said that themselves. Then there's
many blacks.
Many blacks have said that themselves.
Yeah, good.
The idea that we have won that on the battlefield. I mean, just
we won it at a microbe level first, and then the emphasis on conquest is really just to obscure the fact that real U.S.-Indian relations is about mendacious diplomacy. Like, oh yeah, we'll maintain this, but like for instance, like the famous Manhattan trade, where it's like, oh, they don't know the value of Manhattan. No, that was just a symbolic ritual to allow people to pass onto the land, right?
Right. They didn't have a understanding of property rights in the way that the United States did.
Right.
And genocide is just a display of our God-given might, and that's completely justified.
And he mentions the Sioux. Look at the Sioux in Minnesota, and just the settling of Minnesota, and just the lies and withholding of even the meager promises that we made to those people before we just genocided them out of the Missouri River Valley and or the Minnesota River Valley and pushed them into the Dakotas. I mean, that's fundamentally when the Daily Wire folks, when they emphasize conquest, it's really the history is mendacious diplomacy,
which is not, like, that's even so. in addition to conquest being something that you don't necessarily brag about.
Yeah, we conquest when we have the military availability to do it, and then when we can't, we sign these treaties, and when we break them, as soon as we can use force to get what we want.
And I would also say that Waters is onto something. We should give back at least the national parks that we stole from indigenous people. It would actually be, I mean, that makes sense both in terms of a justice and policy perspective. But putting that aside, and then you can see, you know, Tucker is like desperately trying to maintain his like, oh, I can't believe Waters is doing this. I mean, you know, they're going out and having a drink afterwards and just laughing and laughing about how they what they get away with in selling to their white nationalist base. It really is just shockingly
It's
reprehensible.
performance art, basically. And then, I mean, at the same time,
horrible performance art.
I mean, yeah,
with horrible implications, but yes.
Well, right. If you look at it from like a meta viewpoint, it's certainly performance art in terms of representing what fascism looks like, or fascist propaganda in real time. Jesse Waters is 43 years old. What person that age refers to Black people as blacks if they're not doing it just specifically to appeal to
someone whose entire intellectual project began under the tutelage of Bill O'Reilly?
There you go.
And somebody who's appealing primarily to Bill O'Reilly's age cohort,
Yes.
the 70 plus year olds who are falling asleep in front of the TV watching Tucker Carlson and, you know, getting their fear fix in before bedtime.
That's right. Got to get an update on the race war, and Tucker's there to give it to you, folks. There's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.